Well, the state regulates how lots of local entities levy property taxes. And so they can provide those local entities with greater flexibility in the exemptions they provide. One of the big things that has been floated, I think is a good idea, is to change the ability of local entities. Right now, local entities only have the ability to provide property tax exemption on a percentage basis. And they could change that to a fixed dollar amount basis. And that would sort of change the tax burden on those more able to afford it. And I think that would help affordability issues as far as property taxes. The other thing we have in Austin is the cost of transportation. It's gas and fuel and that sort of thing, and that contributes to the affordability problem, because if you want to live in a more affordable house, you sometimes end up further away from the city center and its other resources. So a better transportation infrastructure is also part of the solution. Yeah, well, the traffic in Austin is a symptom of a greater systemic problem, which is the lack of investment we've had in infrastructure over the past decade or 15 years. And that's infrastructure in transportation, it's education infrastructure, it's healthcare infrastructure. You know, the Republican leadership has really exalted this idea of small government in favor of, instead of investing in the infrastructure we need, while at the same time inserting themselves into people's most private decisions. So we need to go back to a system where the government helps all of us and makes the investments we need, and that includes transportation. So right now, the biggest issue is that we're trying to fund transportation for the 21st century based on a 20th century model. We haven't raised the gas tax since 1990. Our revenue from our registration stickers does not keep up with the amount of highway miles we need, and we need to use some of those dollars for bigger infrastructure projects and not just building more highway miles, because right now TxDOT can barely keep up with the maintenance on all the highway miles they're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. So more funding, possibly raising revenues through other ways. Anything else you think?
I know as far as at the state level,
yeah.
You know, the state can also partner with other entities and make sure that they're on the forefront of making sure that the studies that are needed for larger scale rail projects get done efficiently and quickly, so that those become a possibility and not just a pipe dream. Right, well, so obviously the education funding is going to have to change. The court says it's unconstitutional, but we have to, and the cost of education index is old and probably outdated and needs to be updated. The problem is that the solution last session was to eliminate it. And I know some candidates really supported that Republican solution, but what happened is it left the children who attend school in the lowest quintile, the lowest 20% of funded school districts, further apart from those in the top 20%. So we have to have an education solution that provides more money to the system because the court says it has to, and we have to do it in a fair and equitable way so that the kids at the bottom of the scale don't get left further behind, because that's the investment we need to make in the future of the state. That's a great question, because certainly Lieutenant Governor Patrick has said that that is one of his top priorities. As someone with 5 legislative sessions of experience, I've seen budget fights for 5 sessions. I've seen the midnight House deadline where bills get killed for 5 sessions. I've sat in committee hearings for 5 sessions on a range of issues. So my ability to kill any voucher bill that comes over, or know when we're in the strongest negotiating position to pull it out of the House version of the bill, is going to be unmatched from any of the other candidates in the race. So I'm definitely opposed to anything that takes money away from public education in the form of vouchers or school choice, or call it what you want. And the thing is, I think we have a majority, a bipartisan majority in the House to fund education at more appropriate levels without vouchers. And because the court is going to say, you have to do this, we will have to pass an education bill. And if it includes vouchers or not is the big question. I think that's the issue you're raising here. Right, well, it's an issue of community safety, right? And those people are, whatever their immigration status is, are part of our community and deserve the highest services that the police force, the firefighters, EMS can provide them. And that also provides them protection from unscrupulous business people who would rip them off, basically, and through wage theft, and have them work and then not pay them. And I've represented folks who have had that happen to them, who've worked hard for 2 weeks and then have their employer say, well, I'm not going to pay you, and you better not turn me in because I'll turn you in to the immigration authorities. And that's not anything we want for any of the members of our community. To the other part of your question, local law enforcement shouldn't be doing anything, shouldn't be enforcing federal civil immigration issues or any federal civil issue. It's the same as if we asked local law enforcement to arrest people and detain them because they didn't have health insurance under the Health Care Act, right? It's the same sort of federal issue. And think about that. I mean, that is not an idea that anybody would agree to, right? That if you didn't meet the insurance requirement under the Patient Protection Act, then the local sheriff's office or police would detain you. They would ask you for your insurance card. I mean, that's, when you put it in those terms, that's the extent to which this idea is ridiculous, that local law enforcement should be enforcing federal civil laws. I mean, that's not their role in the community, and we shouldn't force that upon them. I think it's very difficult in the legislature when you can, at some point, you can see the writing on the wall and see that a bill is going to pass, and your only choice, and you've tried everything you can to stop it, and then your only choice is to try to make it better and make it do less harm. And I don't think that's cooperating as much as it is having a clear view of the reality of the situation you're in. And there's no point in fighting to the end to make a lot of noise and not get any improvement in legislation when if you worked harder and smarter and knew when you're at a point of disadvantage, you could find some common ground on improvement. So it's a matter of experience in the legislative process, knowing when you don't have the cards to play and trying to figure out how to make the most of a bad situation. And I think that's what our Democratic leaders in the Texas House and Senate have been doing. This is a little bit of a wonky thing, but like I said, I was the clerk for the House Committee on Pensions. So every different pension system has a statutory requirement of how much the state, percentage of payroll the state funds every year. I'd like to change that so that it said that the state funded, or the state through a combination of its contribution and the employee contribution, funded the annually required contribution of each pension plan. And that annually required contribution is the yearly cost. And that just means that no matter what, every year we wouldn't get further behind. And although some plans need more than the ARC to catch up immediately, by putting the ARC as a minimum instead of some, not random, but some picked out of thin air number that may not make sense at the current time, if we peg that contribution to the ARC, we'll make sure our pension systems stay healthy and we never get further behind budget cycle after budget cycle.
Because we're always struggling to keep up with TRS or something.
That's exactly right. And they need that annually required contribution to stay even. And that's a little wonky bit. It's not on the top of everybody's radar, but that's the kind of thing that 5 legislative sessions and a decade of experience will give you, those little small fixes that are realistic, that can be done, and really improve the structural issues we have with government. That's a great question. I think I've touched on it, is that I've been there at the legislature for the last 5 legislative sessions, session after session, seen budget fight after budget fight, worked on Article 2 of the budget, which is the health care portion of it, worked on the substantive issues of reproductive health and abortion rights, worked on pension issues at the legislature, not in outside of the community, not in a theoretical forum of what should the best policy be, but really where the rubber hits the road, where the bills are filed, passed, or stopped. And that's my experience, and that's why I can be the most effective representative for the values that all the candidates share. And they're great, and I think we all want to see better for our state and have the same ideas for seeing better for our state. And the question is, who has the experience to go there and start from day one, know what they're doing, without having to play catch up? So starting out 10 years ahead, I think, is a big advantage.
Awesome, that's it.